Over the years, I've had a lot of questions about the Raven quilt that used to hang up here behind me. There's sort of a tutorial over on my blog, but I did that before I started really getting into filming videos, and I thought I would show you how to make one of your own. I'm Michelle, this is my romantic tangle, and let's talk about my Raven quilt and how it came to be. I had a ton of little hourglass blocks that I had made for a mystery quilt that I then lost interest in. And then I needed to do a bird quilt for a blog hop, and somehow this was born. It is not a difficult quilt to make. It has a whole lot of little bitty pieces. If you are comfortable stitching 2.5-inch hourglass blocks, you can do it. And a little bit of applique. Like I said, it is not hard. It's just kind of fiddly. For the center panel, I took 8 1.5 by 8.5-inch strips and just pieced them together to make a big 8.5-inch square. For the bird, I used some clip art that I had found online. I backed it with fusible web and fused it on. The site that I got my clip art from is no longer active, so it is gone, but luckily it's a silhouette of a bird. There are a lot of them out there. I am sure you can even find a better bird than the one I used. If you look at these blocks, all of those blacks are 2 different fabrics, which kind of mix together when you're not looking at it real close. That would be 1 hourglass block. I made mine from 1.5-inch strips of light and dark fabric using a specialty ruler called the Companion Angle. What is awesome about the Companion Angle ruler is that it lets you cut your half square and quarter square triangles from the same strips that you are using from your squares for the same quilt. I think that saves a tremendous amount of time, and I can't remember what I paid for my ruler. If it's like 15 bucks, it is so worth it to not have to deal with that little 7/8 inch measurement, which befuddles me. You can see in the pictures on the top right and lower left how I use the Companion Angle to cut the quarter square triangles, which I will sew together to make half square triangles, which I will sew together in pairs to make hourglass square units. If you have another preferred method for making hourglass blocks, do it that way. You need 64 hourglass units, and they are 2.5 inches with the seam allowance. They finish down to 2 inches in the quilt. Once you've made all of those hourglass units, you're going to sew them into panels. So your side panels will be 2 units wide by 4 units high, and you will add 1 to either side of the center panel. The upper and bottom panels of hourglass units are going to be 3 units high by 8 units wide. I will show you the sketch that I made of how this all works. Use those to border your raven and you've got a quilt. I went around the edges of the raven. You can see better on the back with a straight stitch in black. From experience, I have learned that I don't like stipple quilting over something black with white or off-white thread, because then you got lines going around your bird, and I find that annoying. You can see here that I just quilted up to the edges of the bird, and it's a wall hanging, so the fact that the bird itself isn't quilted isn't going to hurt anything. I bound it with the same solid black fabric I used for the raven, and that is it. That is my Halloween quilt, which at the time I'd been watching Psycho and thought this would be an awesome quilt to hang in Mrs. Bates's parlor. I wanted to do a more elaborate version, but that hasn't happened yet. Now that I'm spending some time with this one and actually looking at it, I think that's an idea I may pull back out and think a little harder about. I made this quilt for myself and to show off in a blog hop. It wasn't designed to be a pattern, and I understand that having to have like 20 different shades of black and 20 different shades of ecru, either you're the kind of quilter who has that or you're the kind of quilter who doesn't. You could do it with just a textured black and white, and I think it would still look good. I'll put links down in the description below to where I show how to use the Companion Angle ruler. That's in actually a different quilt tutorial. And the original tutorial for this one, for what it's worth, it's got the measurements and the dimensions and quantities listed, so it may be helpful if you're deciding to try this for yourself. Thanks for watching. I hope this answered everybody's questions if they were intrigued by this quilt. I'm sorry that I didn't put together a video at the time that I made it, but like I said, this wasn't planned from the beginning to be a quilt. It just sort of happened, and I am so glad it did because it's one of my favorites. I'm Michelle. This is my romantic tangle, and I'll be back with you with more videos soon.